What is your not-so-fun fact? Before we start, give us your likes and think about what you would say to this question. Enjoy the show. Story 1. Chemically, it's much easier to detect carbon than it is to detect oxygen. A consequence of this fact is that when you feel an urge to breathe, what your body is really doing is alerting you to a buildup of carbon dioxide in your blood, not an absence of oxygen. This means if you were to replace the air around you with 100% nitrogen, your body wouldn't even notice. It wouldn't warn you because it would no longer be producing carbon dioxide. You would just get sleepy and never wake up. Edit to add. As of January 2024, Alabama has begun using this as an executive execution method for the death punishment. Edit. A word. Swipe typing has a mind of its own sometimes. Story 2. Living a healthy lifestyle, eating right, and exercising buys you the slowest rate of death possible at best. I work with the elderly, and a 95-year-old woman mumbled that, "This is what I get for being healthy. Style here." Story 3. Your immune system basically ignores your eyes. If for whatever reason your immune system becomes aware of the existence of your eyes, it can attack them and potentially cause severe damage. This is quite simplified, but if you're interested, look up ocular immune privilege. It's fascinating stuff. Story 4. The low reflective bumper on the rear of an 18-wheeler trailer is called a Mansfield bar. It's named after Jane Mansfield, who died after running into the back of the trailer. Her children, including 3-year-old Mariska Hargitay, were in the back seat. Story 5. There's a type of wasp that burrows into figs, tearing its own wings off as it does so, lays its eggs, then dies. The wasp larvae burrow out eventually. Meanwhile, the fig dissolves and consumes the body of the original wasp. Story 6. Left-handed people used to get forced to learn to be right-handed, as they were seen as being associated with evil and the devil. With me being left-handed, I couldn't imagine being forced to learn to write or do other things with my right hand. I've tried to teach myself. That shit is hard. Story 7. There was once a woman trying to teach a dolphin to speak. She raised it from a baby. When it got to his adolescent years, it became, for a lack of a better word, H0RNE, for this woman, and she helped him with that. Story 8. Bananas are radioactive. Yep, thanks to their potassium content, they emit a tiny amount of radiation. So, technically, you could say we're all a little bit radioactive after a banana snack. Story 9. People of Asian descent are genetically predisposed to alcohol intolerance, which manifests itself in what's called the Asian flush. When they drink, doesn't stop the drinking, just explains the flushing. Story 10. If a cup of hot grease fell on your face, you would die once you began screaming in pain, and the grease entered your mouth, burning your throat shut until you could no longer breathe, most likely before emergency medical intervention. I asked a doctor because I dodged a cup of hot grease that was aiming for my face. It only got my arm and leg. I have scars, but nothing major. Pay attention in the kitchen. Story 11. Any sort of relationship only survives when both parties treat the integrity of the relationship as more important than themselves. If one party treats their own wants and needs as more important than that, the relationship will not survive. You do not just want that your partner is committed to you, as in that they would not cheat on you. That is not even the baseline. You want that your partner is committed to the relationship, as in, they will listen to you even when they think you are wrong, and will negotiate your shared daily life with you, even when formulating their own needs is hard, and will notify you when they notice something that puts the relationship in danger, even when raising the issue would be uncomfortable to them. Story 12. For some time, there was little gap in the calculation regarding the climate change that was puzzling the scientists, making their prediction worse than the observed data. Well, it seems we do know what is this gap, the ocean heat threshold. We understand it now that we have reached that threshold, and there is no turning back. Story 13. Everybody has proteins in their bodies called prions. For the majority of everyone, they work fine and as intended until the day you die. However, an unlucky few will have their prion proteins misfold and will contract a prion disease. In my opinion, none are more terrifying than fatal familial insomnia. Once contracted, you physically lose the ability to fall asleep ever again. We still are unsure the exact purpose sleep serves, but we know that without it, your body doesn't recover from things, and eventually you die. Everyone who gets dies in about a month. Your last month of life is spent quite literally going insane due to sleep deprivation. I have insomnia, and during my worst peak, I went a little over 48 hours without sleeping, and to this day was one of the most brutal experiences ever. I can't even begin to imagine what it would be like. Story 14. Rabbits need to eat their dookie on a daily basis as part of their natural digestive cycle. This is because they are what is called hindgut fermenters, and all their nutrients are absorbed in their foregut. Food fermented in the hindgut needs a second time round to hit that foregut again. Story 15. There is a condition called sudden unexpected death in epilepsy that can occur randomly during or after a seizure. It affects 1/1000. It can occur at any age, and currently the cause of SUDEP is unknown, but some risk factors have been identified including uncontrolled or frequent seizures, epilepsy beginning in childhood, and missed doses of medication, and the risk is higher for people with grande mal seizures. It's the only one cause of death in epilepsy not occurring from drowning or injuries occurring during the seizure. Story 16. Let's say you are immortal, and you took a job when the first stone was laid when they built the Great Pyramid of Giza. That job pays $1,500 HR, and you still have the job. Your start date was 4,500 years ago, and you never spent a single penny. You saved all of it. You still wouldn't have as much money as Jeff Bezos. Sounds wild, doesn't it? But the numbers are off. If the job paid $20, 000 HR Jeff Bezos would have $13 billion more than you do. Story 17. Wait, do you mean your fun fact as in things that describe you, or as in facts you know? I'm gonna go with the former, and say that every time I get any thoughts regarding privacy like sex or being a spy hidden from everyone, I get the sudden urge to take a shit. Story 18. There is a thing called hypoplastic left heart syndrome. It means that the left ventricle does not develop, therefore the heart is not able to pump blood to the organs. Sound pretty fatal? Because it is. Children that are born with it go through several surgeries to correct HLHS, but still, this isn't enough. By the time they're teenagers, they need a heart transplant. But as you may know, heart transplants are not so common, so most of them die after years and years of hospitalization. It's not really common to have kids with this syndrome except for some countries like Poland. In most countries, diagnosing a fetus with this condition is a recommendation for abortion, but it's not in Poland. Even when abortion laws were not as strict as now you can only have an abortion if the pregnancy puts the woman at risk or it's from rape. There was no such recommendation, meaning every year Polish pediatric cardiology sees patients with this syndrome who are basically destined to die when they become teenagers. Story 19. For those that believe in nothingness after death. You know how before you were born it was completely nothing, impossible to recall. Well, when you die it's just like that, but that's not it. What creeps me out is that you won't remember your past life. In other words, it's going to feel like you never existed at all. Story 20. The Venn diagram of people who are in the foster system and then are in prison is damn near a circle. Close to 1/5 of the prison population in the U.S. is comprised of former foster children, Bureau of Justice Statistics 2016, and about 70% of youth who exit foster care as legal adults are arrested at least once by age 26. Courtney et al. 2011. 90% of Washington foster youth who go through 5 placements will spend time in lockup, and only 14% of those kids earn high school diplomas, at best. These results have been standard for decades. Over 70% of all state penitentiary inmates have spent time in the foster care system. California State Legislature. A federal study of former foster care wards reported that 75% of Connecticut youths in the state's juvenile justice system were once in foster care. Bales et al., 1995. Story 21. Well, here's a not-so-fun fact. Studies show that we spend an average of about 6 months of our lives waiting at red lights. Imagine all the things we could do with that time instead. It's a good reminder to make the most of every moment we have. Story 22. Kiwis are closely related to ostriches. That's a fun fact. What's not fun is the fact that mother kiwis produce an egg so large, breeding actually rearranges their guts and skeleton. The egg is about 15% of mama's total weight, and accommodations need to be made. Story 23. So NASA did a study to see what percentage of people would avoid hitting animals. 94% of people would swerve to miss the animal, while 6% wouldn't even try. With tarantulas and snakes being some of the most intentionally commonly hit animals, I understand that people would hit them due to fear of them. I don't think it's right. The worst one is turtles. They were intentionally hit a lot too. It's fucking turtles literally striking one of the goofiest of animals. Also, unfun fact, the band members of the Titanic who went down with the ship, their families were charged with the cost of replacing their rental uniforms. Story 24. If you get a serious enough burn or infection, the damaged tissue has to be removed. This process is called debridement. It entails removing all the dead and damaged tissue. The large portions of damaged tissue can be removed by basically just cutting them out, but smaller sections are often removed with a fancy surgical-grade wire brush. In the case of burns, it is not uncommon for this to be done over a significant portion of the body's surface area, along with it being preformed in basically sauna-like conditions as burns damage the body's ability to regulate temperature. Story 25. Vacuum decay is not impossible. Right now, the universal laws of how things go together, i.e. atoms, subatomic particles, strong and weak nuclear forces, etc., are a result of the most stable resting state of the universe. If anything came along to restabilize that into a simpler, stable resting state, that would cause a cataclysmic cascade of matter that emanated out from the starting point at the speed of light and would shift absolutely everything into a brand new, more stable resting state. Meaning, we couldn't even begin to imagine what would be on the other side of that shift, just not us or anything we know of. Some physicists, as I understand, were cautious about turning on CERN to look for the Higgs boson because of the infinitesimal but real possibility that it would cause the vacuum decay of the universe. This was off the top of my head, and I might have gotten significant portions of it wrong. Please chime in to correct me if it's appropriate. Be kind. Story 26. Old-time photos had a really long exposure time, so people had to be really still for the duration, or they would be blurry. So when you see photos where adults are slightly blurry but an infant is perfectly clear, that infant was likely dead when the photo was taken. Story 27. Your mind, emotions, etc. exist inside your skeleton. I always think of the skull as the base of the body, but we actually exist inside it. For some reason, it freaks me out. Story 28. There's a point in the ocean called Point Nemo, or the Pole of Inaccessibility, and it's popular for being the point in the ocean that's farthest away from land as well as being the hardest to reach. You could sail for days in any direction and find no dry land. The icing on the cake, though, is that the area is rarely passed by ships and planes, so if you by chance reach it and something goes wrong with your boat, you likely won't be found. Story 29. Along the same lines, your image of yourself is how you look in the mirror. So for some reason, if you think your photos don't look like you, flip them horizontally and your photos will look more like what you think you look like. But others see you exactly like you look in your photos. Story 30. Once, in a massive, believed to be untouched cave, a missing hiker was found hanging his foot from a rope. He can't remember the actual word, but was doing Thancave shit. Before falling and getting stuck upside down, his body was almost completely decomposed, but I don't know, I haven't heard it in a while, so if I'm wrong, feel free to correct any mistakes I made. I'm just trying to remember it all. Story 31. The rate of pollution and warming in our planet is such that reducing emissions is no longer viable as a solution for climate change. Now we must also actively try to reverse the effects. This, as you probably know, is very difficult without significant human behavior change. Wildfires, crazy storms, drought, and other irregular weather patterns are going to be the new norm, and sooner or later resources are going to be scarce for 4 billion people living at or close to the equator line. Story 32. For some weird reason, the char variable type in C doesn't have a default sign. This means that each computer decides whether chars should be compiled as signed or unsigned if it isn't specified by the programmer whenever one is declared. If it picks signed, their range is -128 to 127, and if it picks unsigned, it will be 0 to 255. Since chars are used to represent ASCII values, some computers could end up reading text with characters from extended ACI as negative numbers, failing to interpret the text correctly. Story 33. I do not remember how or why I learned this at 10 years old. I'm 52 now. There was this guy a long time ago that I didn't like. He wasn't exactly a bully. Once thing were getting a little testy between us. Words were said, mothers insulted, you get the deal. He was doing the typical, I'm gonna kick your ass posturing. This has never been my style. I responded, it's possible. You might kick my ass, we'll have to find out. I do promise you this. You will remember this day for the rest of your life. Did you know that it only takes 8 pounds of pressure to remove a human ear? We didn't fight after that. Story 34. Not sure how much of a solid fact this is, but I've absolutely experienced it. 50% of healthcare professionals, medical people, etc., get into it for the power, control, and abuse, rather than to help. And it is insanely underreported and practically unheard of, although happening everywhere, every minute.